Welcome to Not Your Typical English Podcast. Join Kristen, Miriam, and Bea, your English teaching hosts. Dive into engaging conversations beyond textbooks, exploring idioms, phrasal verbs, and unique vocabulary. This isn't your typical English class. It's a fun, memorable journey through language, culture, and daily life. Whether you're learning English or just love languages, buckle up for an amusing experience in Not Your Typical English Podcast.
Welcome back, lovely listeners. I'm Bea, and I'm here with my fantastic co-hosts, Miriam and Kristen. Today's episode is going to be an emotional roller coaster as we delve into the world of feelings, blunders, and those moments that make you go, did that really just happen? Get ready for some cringe and chuckles.
That's right, Bea. We've got a plethora of expressions and words to explore today. We've all experienced a faux pas, or moments where we've accidentally put our foot in our mouths.
Yeah, and let's not forget those gaffes that make us feel tongue-tied just to laugh them off later.
And of course, that cringy feeling of schadenfreude. We'll not only explain their meanings, but also share some amusing stories to give them life.
I have mixed feelings about what our listeners might think of us at the end of this episode. We're leaving no emotional stone unturned.
That's right. You know, sometimes when these things happen, you just have to brush it off. Don't dwell on it. We are human, and these things happen to everyone.
We're diving into tales where we've ended up as the laughingstock, sharing those moments that are occasionally a bit cringe-worthy.
So, settle in for an episode filled with everything from funny mishaps to moments where we have completely felt silly. Hey, we've all been there. If you're ready for a laugh, I'm sure this episode is for you.
Absolutely, Kristen. It's going to be an episode full of laughter, empathy, and maybe a few face palms. Join us as we share some hilarious stories about those everyday gaffes. So grab your favorite drink, find a cozy spot, and let's navigate through the world of cringe and chuckles together.
So guys, let's start with those classic moments when we wish the ground would swallow us up. I've had my fair share, but one of the most recent ones was when I was taking part in one course, and there was a lady who was one of the oldest students in the group. So the younger people, we were always very loving and caring with her. And she was a bit, I don't know how to put it nicely, maybe old-fashioned. And I remember that the last day of the course, I said something along the lines of like, oh, you were like the granny of the group.
No.
And I got a killer look from her.
Oh, no.
Shortly after that, I discovered that she's my mom's age.
Oh.
Talk about cringe-worthy moments.
Ouch, ouch. Oh, I'm sorry, Bea, but it sounds like you really put your foot in your mouth there.
Yes, I did.
Even though I know you probably meant it in an endearing and loving way. I hope you just brushed it off. Did you learn any lessons from that gaffe?
Definitely. At that moment, I just played along and pretended nothing happened, but I have now learned to keep my mouth shut.
Well, I have an absolute gem of a story. So one day, I was in a rush getting ready for work, and I was wearing a dress and ties. I hurried to the office, went to the teacher's room as usual, and while I was checking my lessons, Bea pointed out that my dress was caught in my ties. So yes, I had made the entire journey from home to school with my underwear on display. Yeah, I just laughed it off anyway.
Oh, no. Well, honestly, I feel like when I make a faux pas and I embarrass myself, I have a tendency of pushing it out of my mind and I try to forget it. Otherwise, the memory makes me shudder with embarrassment and the cringe is just too much to handle. But for this episode, I did some digging into the mental archives and I recall 2 language blunders I made as I was learning Italian and French. I was in my first few weeks of Italian school, and the teacher asked the students to pair up and write a dialogue between 2 gentlemen who were having an argument. At that point, my husband, whose Italian was only slightly better than mine, had taught me some useful phrases he had heard during his past year in Italy. So, while my partner and I were writing our dialogue, I suggested one phrase be added. The moment the ungodly curse came flying out of my mouth, my Italian teacher, who was correcting some of our work, raised his eyebrows so high and let out a gasp that got the attention of the whole class. As I was turning beet red from embarrassment, not fully understanding my mistake, the teacher asked that I never repeat that word in a public setting ever again. Turns out, Italian is full of curse words against religious figures. So that was a lesson learned.
Yeah, that's right, Chris. Yeah. Well, I believe anyone who has learned a new language has made gaffes like this. I recall during my first Spanish exam, intending to convey that I was very embarrassed, I used the term embarazada, a classic beginner's mistake, as embarazada in Spanish means pregnant. So, yeah. We shouldn't be overly concerned about becoming everyone's laughing stock when we learn a language. After all, these mistakes are part of the learning process.
Yes, definitely. And talking about language blunders, I remember soon after I arrived in Italy that I wanted to send my usual Christmas cards by post. So up I went to the newsagent and very proudly asked for 5 stampi. Clearly, that's not the way to say stamps in Italian.
It's not.
After that, I got completely tongue-tied and left completely embarrassed and without my stamps. I don't think I've ever been back to that newsagent. Chris, what was your other story?
Well, the other one was when I was meeting my in-laws for the first time for dinner at their home. My husband explained that speaking some French to his parents would impress them, and I aimed to please. So I asked that he teach me some expressions. He taught me what I thought was, the meal is delicious. But instead, he taught me to say, the meal is disgusting.
Oh no.
So we were enjoying the delicious meal when I decided to utter my compliment, and imagine my surprise when my comment didn't land the way I had intended. I was mortified, but they thought it was hilarious. Less to say, language mishaps can happen all the time, especially with double entendres in French and Italian. I wouldn't be surprised if our listeners have had at least one cringy experience due to language faux pas.
I'm sure. And how about those times when you couldn't stop laughing, even though you probably should have? I have mixed feelings about it. They are thoroughly enjoyable, but I then feel guilty about it.
Of course, yeah. Oh, don't get me started. In elementary and middle school, I would constantly get in trouble for laughing long after the joke was over. It was embarrassing. I think I was called Giggles for most of my tween years. Also, I hate to admit it, but I can't help but laugh at videos where people fall or get hurt. It's not personal. I think I just laugh because I'm uncomfortable. Call it Schadenfreude, I suppose.
Yeah, I agree. Me too. But if it makes it any better, I laugh at myself too when I fall. So that makes me less guilty, I guess. Maybe. There was this one time when I banged my head against an half-open mosquito net. I fell to the ground, and while I was falling, I dropped the paper I was holding onto a candle. So, yes. So not only did I hurt myself, but I was also about to set my house on fire. Yeah, but nevertheless, I couldn't stop laughing. What a disaster.
God, Miriam.
Yeah, I know.
I actually had a recent extreme Schadenfreude moment I am not proud of. I am not going to give too many details because, people might be listening. But let's just say that at a recent event, someone voluntarily put themselves into an extremely embarrassing situation. But this person could not recognize it was embarrassing. So, regretfully, I have to say that me and some friends started laughing. And we just could not hold the laughter. It was terrible. Some people were laughing so much that they had to leave the room. We could not stop laughing. We should have, but we couldn't. There was no stopping. My husband instead did a very, very good job holding the laughter. I'm so proud of him for keeping his cool.
Wow, what a good job on his part. Well, We've all had those hilarious yet slightly embarrassing moments. But hey, they make the best stories, right?
Yes, definitely. They're the stories we cringe at initially, but chuckle about in hindsight.
In today's Grammar Corner, we're diving into the combined use of the past simple and past continuous tenses. It's a powerful tool in storytelling.
Absolutely, Christine. These two tenses together help paint a vivid picture of action happening in the past. The past continuous often sets the scene for longer action, while the past simple comes in to capture specific moments within that context.
Exactly. For instance, Chris said, "We were enjoying the delicious meal when I decided." Here, "we were enjoying the delicious meal" sets the ongoing action, and "I decided" interrupts the action, so a clear sequence of events.
Right. It adds depth and clarity to the narrative. Like Miriam said, "While I was falling, I dropped the paper." The past continuous shows the ongoing action, and the past simple marks the sudden event.
Yes, it's like we're setting the stage with one tense and highlighting key moments with the other. How about my Italian teacher, who was correcting some of our work, raised his eyebrows? He was correcting some papers and then he was surprised by your curse, Chris, so he raised his eyebrows. The past continuous tells us about the marking session, and the past simple indicates the moment he was surprised.
Yeah, it's a great way to add detail and emphasis to stories. Like, some people were laughing so much that they had to leave the room. Here, the past continuous captures the ongoing enjoyment, and the past simple marks the sudden change by leaving the room.
It helps us structure our stories and gives us a better flow to the events. So, listeners, try combining these tenses in your narratives for a more engaging storytelling experience.
All right, let's delve into these terms, starting with Schadenfreude. It's that guilty pleasure we sometimes feel when witnessing someone else's misfortune.
Right. And a faux pas refers to a social blunder or mistake, often unintentional, that might make us cringe later.
A gaffe is more about a social blunder or misstep that could be embarrassing.
Blunder is a term for a clumsy or careless mistake.
Mishap refers to an unfortunate but usually minor accident or mistake.
Exactly. Moving on to hilarious, it's when something is extremely funny or amusing, often leading to uncontrollable laughter. Instead, if you have mixed feelings about something, you feel both pleased and not pleased about it at the same time.
Laughingstock is when someone becomes an object of ridicule or mockery.
Tongue-tied describes that feeling when you're too embarrassed or nervous to speak or respond.
To brush off means to casually dismiss or ignore something.
And to laugh off refers to trying to make light of something embarrassing or awkward by laughing about it.
Yeah. And if you've ever felt like you've put your foot in your mouth, well, it means you've said something embarrassing or tactless unintentionally.
And lastly, play along involves pretending to agree or participate in something even if you're not entirely convinced.
After listening to some of our collective embarrassing moments, we hope that it didn't induce what we've chosen as the word of this episode. The word is cringe. We can cringe at the thought of something embarrassing, uncomfortable, or disgusting.
Yeah, in this way we use it as a verb, like to cringe in fear or cringe with discomfort. It helps explain that ick we can feel sometimes towards things.
The action also has a physical representation in our bodies. We often tense our bodies up, squeeze our eyes closed, move away from something quickly, and sometimes shake and shudder involuntarily from the distasteful thought.
The word cringe can also be used to describe things that evoke that sensation, but we can also say things like, "Ooh, that scene was cringy," or cringe-worthy.
Well, that being said, sometimes we have to learn to be comfortable being uncomfortable, whether it's learning a new language or dealing with the inevitable cringe moments that may come our way.
Well, that was quite the journey through various moments of embarrassment, humor, and the occasional missteps we all encounter in our lives. Remember, these experiences often teach us valuable lessons and add a bit of spice to our stories.
Absolutely. It's reassuring to know that these blunders and funny moments are part of what makes us human. They often lead to some of the most memorable anecdotes we share.
And while some of these moments might feel cringe-worthy at the time, they often become cherished memories we laugh about later. Embracing them is all part of the roller coaster of life.
So whether it's a hilarious gaffe or a tongue-tied mishap, they're essential components that shape the diverse range of experiences in our lives. Let's not take ourselves too seriously and learn to laugh at our blunders along the way.
We hope today's episode of Not Your Typical English Podcast sparked a newfound enthusiasm for language learning within you. Dive into our archives to explore more fascinating language insights. Your feedback fuels our passion, so leave us a review and tell us what you'd love to hear next. Until next linguistic adventure, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep pushing your language boundaries.